Hello, everyone. This is Jim West, founder and CEO of TopCyberPro.com, and I have another great podcast episode for you today. Today, we have Keon Williams with Class LLC, and this whole episode is going to be titled pretty much on how do I start in cybersecurity. And a lot of folks, I get asked this question a lot as I come across folks about, hey, where do I begin? What resources to use? This is going to be a chocked full episode of lots of information. It's going to be information overload, for sure. And don't worry, because if we mention any websites, mention any resources that are online, we will be sure to put all those URLs in the description below. But without further ado, I want to introduce Keon Williams. He is the CEO and founder of Class LLC, and he's doing great work in the industry with cyber education and more. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Keon to introduce yourself, tell us about your career, and share any fun stories or facts about yourself.
Jim, I appreciate you having me. I thought the best way to introduce myself is to tell a story. So
Okay.
I agree with you. Everybody wants to know how to get into cybersecurity. The way that I got into cybersecurity was from a car accident. So I don't recommend my approach, but along the way, I've learned all kinds of great things. And so the original car accident, I used to unload tractor trailers. This was in the 90s. There were no cell phones. All I had was a pager. And because of my honesty, this lady took pity on me. I couldn't find the insurance card. I said, I've been working all summer, getting ready to go to college. Whatever it takes, I will give you the cash so you can be reimbursed for fixing your car. I honored my commitment. She got me a job at the Georgia World Congress Center Authority. And that initial work on the help desk changed the entire trajectory of my career because my
Wow.
plan was to be a chief financial officer. And so the work at the Congress Center back in the late 90s, early 2000s was not the easiest work. I started off as what they used to call a cable monkey. So I strapped an Ethernet cable to my belt. I crawled through the rafters and I pulled out thin net cable, replaced it with Ethernet cable so that they can convert from a mainframe system to Windows for Workgroups.
Mhm.
And so I've been doing this long enough that I've seen all kinds of transitions in technology and other things. But had I not had that accident, had I not honored my commitment, had that wonderful person not gotten me a job as a cable monkey that then transitions to the help desk, that then became the foundation of all of the IT work that I did in the Army, even though my job specialty was chemical weapons. Since I knew something about computers, every time there was a computer issue, I
You
was
was
the
the
guy
computer
that they
guy.
found. And so now I've spent 30 years, if you combine the help desk and the military and what I've done professionally, doing telecommunications and IT and security. Now, while other people can't follow my same path, because I don't recommend getting in an accident
Excellent.
to start a career, one of the things that has been extremely valuable along the way is taking the time to study, to get certifications, to academically learn how things work, and then master explaining to other people what is the value of the work that I'm doing. For anybody at any level, I believe, whether you're an entry level security person or a senior executive with the title of Chief Information Security Officer, if you can explain the value of the work that you're doing, you're going to have the opportunity to have a long and successful career that is much more rewarding than it is frustrating because people know why you exist and why they want you in the room rather than you just being a necessary evil.
Wow. Part of your story when you mentioned, that this woman took your word and that really shows a lot of your character right off the bat. As a young man, you was already a man of your word, a man of integrity. And that's big. That's and then the fact that you didn't expect, a return of any kind of favor. You was just trying to honor making things whole. But because of that intersection of life, if you will, through an accident, but you keeping your word and following through, and this person, this lady, got you that first job that completely, like you said, changed the trajectory of your life and career. You mentioned you was going to be a CFO, and you completely, went away from finance over to securing these financial systems. So you took a different path, and that's just wonderful. Thank you for sharing that story, because it's funny that I think more professionals, senior professionals, and experts out there, yeah, we got a lot of rock stars and what I call level 99 experts out there in SMEs, but we really need them to start sharing their stories on their platforms, on their social media, share their story of how they got started. Because when people see folks like us, seasoned professionals and experienced professionals, they're like, oh God, that guy is like way above and beyond, and I'll never get there. But we all had our start. We all had our story, you know. And I'm gonna just make a great assumption here, Keon, that we're pretty close in age here because you mentioned the time frame when you had the accident about to go into college. It was probably early mid 90s.
Yep.
Okay. And so this is back during the days of it would just a segue from 386 processors to 486. And then we started having like Pentium 100 megahertz, 120. And it started like, every three months, it was like a new processor, new video card, and all these components and so forth. And you mentioned having to do the cable work. I had a similar story. I was working, my first real computer job was at CompUSA. But before then, I was just building computers for friends and local businesses in Central Louisiana because I just knew how to do it. I just would order because no one wanted to pay, or I wasn't going to pay $2, $3, $4,000 for a PC system that was already pre-assembled. I went to Newegg, Tiger Direct. I definitely aged myself with that reference, but Tiger Direct, Newegg, all the other different websites where you would source a motherboard from this site, RAM from this site, a monitor from this site. You basically Frankenstein and build your own custom PC. But I found that I could build one for about $700 to $900 if I really wanted a graphics card, let's say 1,000. But for 1,000 or less, when it was easily, $2, 3, $4,000 otherwise. And I was supporting local businesses, making decent money. But then finally, I said, you know what? Let me go work for a regular 9 to 5. And so I went from a bench technician, just as doing hard drive like peripheral installs, and in less than 90 days, I was corporate lead technician. They would fly me all over to the States. This was CompUSA when they still existed. But they would send me all over for training. I trained with Intel Labs. I trained with Microsoft. I was one of the first early MCSEs. I trained under 3Com. I was the first master of networking. So very, very few people out there are old enough and exposed enough to remember when 3Com tried to enter in the market against CCIEs with Cisco with the master of networking, and it didn't take off because within the first 30 days of them announcing the program, they shut it down. But I was one of the first 100 that went through that training program as the pilot. But anyhow, but yeah, gaining the knowledge, soaking it up, learning the new technologies, especially in the 90s, there was always a new computer hitting the market, a new, peripheral or what they would do, convergence of different technologies. You had that modem slash sound card debacle that a lot of people hated. And there was just so many, just everybody was out there throwing out products and hardware, and like the video game thing where there was always another, like Diamond Multimedia was the top video card for video gaming. And then I remember when about 95, 96, when Nvidia started making, trying to make a push to challenge Diamond. I was like, no, Nvidia will never be as big as Diamond. And lo and behold, Nvidia is one of the most valuable companies on the planet today. So yes, a
Yep.
lot has changed. When you have that 30 plus years of a career, you've seen it all. And so I could definitely identify with that journey of, going from 386s to what we got today. It's amazing. Um, I want to talk a lot, focus right now on Class LLC because again, you have what looks to be a phenomenal business that is seeking to provide education and training and other services. Can you maybe talk a little bit about, what is the main objectives and mission for Class LLC?
Well, so Class LLC in the past was a mix of consulting, education, and I am known in small circles for throwing world-class parties. And the Great Resignation caused me to reevaluate what I really wanted to do because so many fantastic professionals left their corporate jobs and started their own businesses that the consulting marketplace got very saturated. And for the last couple of years, it's been difficult to stand out because there are too many brilliant people in the marketplace owning their own individual consulting firms. And so what I've done and how I have shifted going into the future is I primarily provide cybersecurity education for board directors and non-technical C-suite executives. And even my conference, the Cyber Strategy Retreat that I do in Atlanta in July, is a world-class party that also happens to be an educational event. So I've never had anybody over 9 conferences say that they didn't learn something. We're not selling products, but we're having really good conversations about how do we solve real problems that we're facing today. What's really interesting is that I have been blessed to have a small network of people that I serve, which puts me in a position to give away as much as possible to as many people as possible, because most of the entry level people that I talk to are not the right customer for the services that I offer, because my services are focused on board directors and executives. But what that also means is that I'm in a very good position to tell people the truth with no strings attached. Now, I'm not lying to the board directors or the C-suite people, but I'm not going to try to make a sale to an entry-level person. I have one entry-level class, and usually it is corporate sponsored for people at the beginning of their careers. But 90% of the work that I do, I'm hanging out with executives, and that's how I make a living. And then with the 10% that's remaining, I give away as much knowledge as possible to be a blessing to other people, just like that lady that got me a job because I told the truth and honored my commitment, created an opportunity that changed my life.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I know before we started recording for this episode, you did mention that you served your country, and I know that it was the Army, correct? And that the Army has a lot of
Well,
values. There's a lot of values, and I've worked with the military for a long time, but my memory is not exact. But hearing you share your story and talk about how you give back and the things that you do and how you represent and act in your business, it seems like you're still representing all those Army values. Would you mind, just for our viewership that might not be familiar, just speaking on a few of those values that are still important to you today?
yeah, I remember my first duty station, they had the values on the wall. So you have individual pictures for loyalty, duty, honor, respect, personal courage, selfless service, and it all influences everything that you do as a service member. What is also interesting is that both my mother and my father were in the Army. So my mom was a non-commissioned officer. My dad was a warrant officer. Both of my grandfathers were in the Army. So I come from a family that has made serving the country through the military a tradition. And then beyond that, I grew up in a family that has a strong faith-based background. So it's really the combination of my faith and the things that I was able to put in practice in my military service that lead me to want to serve others, because I have been the beneficiary of so many other people who followed the same approach.
Wonderful. And then for your family and yourself, thank you for your service. Again, it takes a certain caliber of person to really, the one thing that reaches out to me in those values was, a selfless service, being in service of others. And so it's very powerful. A lot of people think that leaders are the ones going, do this, do this, do this, like always kind of shouting the orders. But a real leader serves his team because he knows he can't move that mountain by himself. It takes a team of people to move a mountain. And so being in service of your team is everything in leadership. Some of the things I like to talk about now, because I know people are still watching, like, okay, when we're going to get to the good part, and we're about to get there. I assure you, we're about to get there. But because I really want you to really know, Keon and really who he is, this next question is pretty important. What motivates you? I know you mentioned some of your history and shared your story with us, but day to day, we got it seems like there's never-ending threats, attacks. There's always a breach here or there. It seems like we're fighting a losing battle at times, right? And so there's a lot of talk in the news and industry about, cyber fatigue, security fatigue, where professionals are just overwhelmed, and in some cases they're leaving cyber altogether and just going into another career field. So I've had one colleague of mine, which was pretty much another level 99 in industry, and he just said, "I'm done. I'm just going to go," and I think he's taken some short sabbatical, but he's about to transition into whatever his original bachelor's was in. But he's leaving cyber, and I'm like, "You're leaving. You have all this knowledge and experience." He's like, "I'm just done with it." And so, what motivates you, Keon?
If I'm being honest, I love the work. Now, if you look at the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Careers and Studies, you actually have 52 different work roles, plus or minus, depending on how they update the database. But what that means is that the entire population of security people is not limited to being a security operations center analyst or doing compliance management or just doing security control assessments. I have the privilege of working in the work role that NICCS calls executive cybersecurity leadership. And so because I've been doing this so long, even as an educator, most of the people that I talk to are executives who need to understand the value of security. And once I see that light bulb go off, I have the privilege of impacting all the companies that those executives serve. Like I taught a CISO class earlier this week, and I had about a dozen people in the room from various backgrounds working in different sizes of companies. And some of the CISOs were talking about how frustrated they were and they were just going to become consultants. And I said, please don't become a consultant. That work is harder than being a full-time employee. But I also encourage them to consider, have you thought about your real value proposition? The real value proposition of security people is not to put their hands on the keyboard, but it is to assess risk that they've identified and then communicate it in a way that benefits the organization that they're serving. And that definition of the cybersecurity profession applies to all of those work roles. And it gives somebody a anchor point to say that, all right, today was a horrible day because of all the tickets, all of the pressure and all of the stress, but I'm in a service role that's making the world a better place for the company that I work in. And it's allowing the company that I work in to honor its commitments to the people who are the stakeholders. So that then, if I'm a security person in a hospital, every minute of every day that I'm working in that hospital, I'm allowing the hospital to save lives and deliver healthcare services. Or if I'm a cybersecurity person in a bank, it's not about banks making money, but it's about the fact that the banking industry underpins and supports the entire marketplace for the economy in the United States. So I, as an individual security analyst, have the opportunity to contribute to the success of the nation because I'm showing up every day and doing my job and working to serve others. Well, then it becomes really easy by changing your mind and your perspective about the work to say that this is work worth doing and I'm paid well to do it, and other people benefit because I get out of bed and get dressed and show up every day to do the best job that I possibly can.
Yep, that's pretty much what it is. We do the best we can. There's a couple words in your answer there that I really, want to kind of come back on. And one of those is like earlier you mentioned something about like speaking to these executives and providing this education for senior leaders. One of the challenges is trying to train up, whether from the receptionist at the front door to the C-suite. Everyone in organizations, cyber education is super important at every level, right? And obviously, training should be tailored to your different needs and your audience, obviously. But when you're dealing with cyber leaders, these are the guys that need to at least have some knowledge so that when people are making these recommendations and businesses are trying to sell them solutions looking for a problem, as we like to say, they're able to at least have enough knowledge to be able to kind of filter out a lot of noise that we have for solutions and services. And then even from their own teams, when their teams are making recommendations of things that can cost potentially hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars in licensing costs, hardware acquisition, service contracts, you got to be very at least knowledgeable to a level to where you can at least understand what these technologies are doing and how they're supporting your organization's goals and objectives, to serve their customers and clients, right? And it's admirable work. When you mentioned whether you work for a hospital, bank, or any organization, they're servicing some customer of some kind. And it's very important. We need more people in cyber. We don't, like I said, we don't discriminate on basis of nothing. If you can read and comprehend, the pool is warm. We welcome you to jump in, and and it's a very good career. It's a very stable career. Even during the shutdowns during the global pandemic, IT and cyber roles were still having to report to work and show up, and they were still, whereas other sectors like energy, oil and gas, particularly in Houston, Texas, took a major hit. And the story that I'll share is that the reason why TopCyberPro.com exists is I had a friend of mine. She luckily was about to head to a bank and sign paperwork for, I think it was a $12,000 or $13,000 loan. But she was in her car hesitant to go into the bank. She called me. She says, "Hey, Jim, I know you do the cyber security stuff. I applied to, I don't want to name the university because I'm not going to speak ill of them right now, but she had saw an advertisement. She clicked the links, went through the application process. Of course, she got accepted. And of course, the bill was either $12,000 or $13,000 for a 6-month program where they would have labs because obviously no one was doing classes because of the shutdown. But it was all virtual remote training with, virtual instructors. And when I looked at all the documentation, I didn't see, the one thing I didn't see was any certifications. So when I looked at it, I said, so all you're going to get is a certificate that says a certificate of completion that you completed this 6-month course with this university. It meant nothing in the job industry. And I was just appalled by the fact that she was about to get a 10K plus loan to give to this educational institution. And I'm like, look, instead of spending, this money and getting a loan for this, I would have rather see you sign up for two different boot camps because, boot camps could be anywhere from, $3,000 to $7,000 on average. I said, I'd rather you pay for two boot camps that has like a pass guarantee where you get at least two attempts on the cert and do it that way because at least you'll get some down and dirty information, go pass your cert, and you'll have something that is marketable in the job market, meaning you'll have a certification or two. I'd rather you do that with that kind of money than, but then what I ended up telling her, I said, look, don't do this. I'm going to send you some stuff from YouTube. Like to call it YouTube University. It's a free online university, right? But there's a
Right.
lot of like techno music. There's only a little bit of techno music that's good. There's a lot of garbage out there. YouTube is the same. There's an ocean of garbage you got to shift through. And so I had told her, said, hey, the one I usually recommend for folks that are like going after Security Plus is Professor Messer. I was like, hey, here's Professor Messer. All his videos are free. He covers the latest edition of the version of the test. Start with some of these videos. Here's some other videos I'm going to send you for foundational conceptual knowledge so that you can kind of grasp things. And I said, look, anytime you can't understand it from YouTube, feel free to text me, message me, and I'll get on a phone call with you. And so, giving someone that just lost their job in oil and gas a way ahead that was low cost to no cost is what drove me to make topcyberpro.com. Because once I saw, and once we had that conversation, obviously with our phones and listening devices, doing the targeted marketing, of course, for the next week, I had all these ads from all these various universities trying to sell me a cybersecurity course. And I started looking at the pricing of those. And again, we're talking, 5, 10, some of them were even $20,000. And it was just appalling that a lot of institutions is taking advantage of people. Now, there's some institutions, because there's the other side of the spectrum before people want to jump on the comments on me. There are some universities that in their cybersecurity degrees or programs, they have certifications built in. And for those, I applaud those because at least the student graduates or completes the course with something that they can use in the job industry to procure that first job. And to those, I applaud those. But for the programs that do not have certifications embedded, I have a bad taste in my mouth for those educational institutions. But anyhow, with that being said, I mentioned Professor Messer, which I'll put the link in the description below for his channel. But Keon, what are some, resources online? And even if they're courses that you have for free online, what are some courses that you would recommend for that person to say, hey, I'm starting day one here. Where do I go? What do I search for? Where can I start day one? What would you recommend?
I recommend that anybody that wants to do anything in security on day one, read NIST Special Publication 800-30, Special Publication 800-37, and Special Publication 800-39. My middle daughter, when she was 15, about to be 16, said, Dad, I'd love to work with you part-time. And I said, daughter, I run a risk management consulting company. You have to understand what we're doing if you're going to work for me. And now that she is in college, she has a greater understanding of risk management than all of her peers, because when she was still in high school, in ninth grade, for 4 years, we continued to have conversations about how do you manage cybersecurity risk according to a standard. Now, professionally and corporately, I do certification training, and I'm also a college professor, but anybody that wants to confirm that this is the right profession for them can read the standards that are publicly available that it costs no money so that they can determine, is this really what I want to do?
Mhm.
And one of the things that I argue in my CISO and my board classes is that the real work of security is risk management. I identify risk, I assess risk, I respond to risk, I communicate what I've done, I measure the performance, and I rinse and repeat over and over again. And NIST 800-30, 37, and 39 are all risk management standards. NIST spends a lot of time in Special Publication 800-30 just talking about how do you conduct a risk assessment. Who are my threat actors? What is their motivation? What happens when they exploit a vulnerability? And given all the possibilities, how do I reduce that down to a plan that allows me to put countermeasures in place to limit the exposure that my company faces? That's all of the work roles in the profession, because everybody in the profession is going to contribute to the management of risk. And then you build on the assessment guide and understand at a system level, how do I manage risk based on the information that we're processing? And then the information that we process establishes the minimum necessary controls. And then 800-37 is going to say, what are the controls? How do I implement them? How do I verify that they're effective? How do I engage the business in participating in the activity? And then we're going to do continuous monitoring. And then 839 builds upon that by saying, let's not just focus at the system level, but let's look at a 3-tier organizational structure that identifies the role and responsibility of the board and the CEO. What's the role and responsibility of the C-suite and all of business executives in the organization? Hey, don't forget that a system owner and a data owner play a part in the management of cybersecurity risk. And now all of a sudden, brand new entry-level cybersecurity people recognize that the success of the organization does not depend exclusively on them. Now they have confidence that, hey, I can specialize in different areas and then pick the right certifications that are going to enhance my ability to provide value. Now, I personally am a big fan of Certified in Cybersecurity from ISC2 because it is one of the best entry-level certification and training programs on the marketplace, and it costs nothing. I mean, it's not free, but literally people spend more on their cell phone bill every month than the cost of acquiring a professional certification. But once you do the Certified in Cybersecurity, and maybe you do Security Plus, because government contracts and the DoD require that as a minimum standard, even for non-security people. And then EC Council has a certified cybersecurity technician that has a lot of labs for network penetration testing and network defense. If you do those 3 certifications, all of those are set up for self-study. You know, Jay Bavisi at EC Council is doing the same thing that Clar at ISC2 is doing. And they said, this is so important that we're almost giving it away. And so while they're giving it away, take advantage of it.
Take advantage.
And so get Security Plus, get certified in cybersecurity, get the certified cybersecurity technician. And if somebody is willing to spend the time and a little bit of money to master the fundamentals, then they can start thinking about, well, do I want to specialize in cloud? Do I want to be a network engineer? Do I want to do governance, risk management, and compliance? I'm a huge fan of privacy because privacy is business oriented. And the International Association of Privacy Professionals, all of their certifications are accredited. And so you know that my IAPP certification has value in the marketplace, but I have coached, mentored, and supported a couple dozen people that did Certified Information Privacy Manager that now have an understanding about data protection. And even though they were focused on privacy, data is data. So if I can protect personal information, I can protect regulated information, I can protect corporate secrets, I can protect any information in the company. The same things that I do for privacy equip me to do data protection within an organization and to respond to incidents and to plan and to do everything else. And so the sky is really the limit if there are 50 work roles in the profession, but the starting point, I think, is going to be certifications. And even though I have multiple degrees, what I believe is that there's a difference between theory and practice. And I'm a college professor now, and my job as a college professor is to teach theory so that when people step into a work role, the theory informs the practice, but the best demonstration of practice is that you have a professional certification. And so people are at the very beginning, instead of spending $40,000 on a bachelor's degree, when maybe 5 of your classes are going to be focused on cybersecurity, spend $50 to maybe $3,500 to get a collection of entry-level professional certifications. And then when you're in the job, most employers want their people to be as smart as possible. And now you can use tuition reimbursement from your employer, from your entry-level cybersecurity job, to underwrite the cost of you getting a degree that's going to expand your ability, because now you have the combination of theory and practice, and you're actually doing the work.
Wonderful. 1 second, because I have a graphic that just speaks to right what you're saying. 1 second. It was funny.
And see, for the audience, he didn't know what I was going to say.
I didn't.
And
So
the
this is real
consistency of this
time. This is
conversation.
not scripted. But I created this simple graphic kind of show like someone graduating out of high school. One person went to work for, started at a service desk and they got a couple certs, started a service desk, and they started working their way up. One person went into a college 4-year degree program and they ended up student debt, student debt, student debt. And now they're trying to enter the job market with 0 years experience. Whereas this person 4 years later, they have 4 years of experience, have potentially moved up in their role once they prove themselves competent and capable. And then now they're able to get tuition reimbursement because they're a salaried employee and the company is going to now pay them to get their degree. And I said, this is a better pathway. Cyber as an industry is one that the barrier to entry is not a degree. A barrier to entry is not any one single certification. You could do any mixture of certifications. The barrier to entry, simply put, is yourself. How much time you're willing to invest into studying and learning. I talk to people a lot about we have YouTube University, which I already mentioned. You could you could search for any kind of free videos and content to start learning. Keon has already mentioned 3 very, very important NIST SP publications, special publication documents, which I'll also put the links below for you. But whichever avenue you take to get into cyber, there is a million plus ways for you to get into cyber. But it starts with the first step to say, I want to start a fire in myself to learn as much as possible, be a sponge and absorb stuff. Start following different people on LinkedIn and Facebook and start joining these different discussion groups, because that's what we do as professionals. We join these groups, we'll have topics and discussions. In your town, there will be conferences, events, and chapter meetings that you can connect with folks in your area and potentially and hopefully find someone that can coach and mentor you. Mentorship is really big in our industry as well, where people are willing to help other people, share information, and provide guidance. And I think in this industry, I would say that's what really sets our industry apart from almost every other industry, is that camaraderie, like instant camaraderie. You could just meet someone and within 5 minutes, you're sharing ideas. We're able to have these discussions and share links and share papers, and all this information is largely free. And so it just takes just having initiative and drive and a desire to keep learning, and you'll find yourself there. You will find your path. For Keon, it took a car accident to instantly change his life. But for you, the roadmap could be start with SAP, SP 800 documents, pick up one cert, do some more study, and then you might find, okay, the guys were mentioning GRC, the risk management, compliance, governance roles, which they're very in demand. Everywhere you go, they're looking for GRC roles. And this is where people talk about risk management framework, RMF, or doing like an ISO 27001 or any other type of security framework that's being audited or applied against. So everywhere in the world, they need GRC roles. And these also manifest itself as like security auditors, security control assessors. There's multiple levels of different types of roles, ISSO, ISSM. So there's all kinds of roles even within GRC. So we talk about 50 plus roles in cyber. Even some of the roles in cyber will have a subdivision of roles within that silo, if you will, or that niche of cybersecurity. But it just takes reading about it, talking, connecting to people that are doing the role. Talk to some people that are doing, SCA-V work and ask them, hey, what's a week like for you, an average week? And then start networking and connecting so that you can get a better idea. You know what? That does sound interesting. I want to keep learning more about that. Or that actually looks interesting, because not everybody's going to be a software developer. Not everybody's going to be like, hey, I want to be a penetration tester and learn how to hack stuff. That's not cyber. Is it a big field within cyber with very lucrative salary ranges? Yes. But you can find good salary ranges in any title you pick. Just pick a path and start working towards it. And the beautiful thing about cyber is that, let's say you went on the GRC path for a while, you decide, you know what, this is not really for me. I'm going to go try this for a while. Our industry allows wonderful lateral movement from one part to another. It's not like you got to, summit another mountain to be able to go to another part or sector of the industry. And so I definitely love this industry and what we do. What about when it comes to like keeping track of like latest trends and news? Because, as you're talking, Keon, to like these senior leaders and providing your educational services, getting these guys more what I call plugged in, because that's really what it is. It's about making them, one, understand the importance of why cyber matters, right? That's like the first hurdle to come, right? But the best case is they're coming to you because they know cyber matters, but they need to know the translation pieces, I like to say it, right? And another term that they deal with, which, I know everybody says risk management, but I like to call it a risk negotiation, right? Because these executive leaders got limited budgets. They got the bottom line upfront budgets, and they're trying to figure out, well, I got my security guy saying I need this long list of stuff. We can't buy all of this stuff this year, but the security teams or their CISOs or CSOs may say, well, we recommend these three. But even for an executive to have that minimal translatable understanding, like having a minimum knowledge base, which I'm assuming this is your education, where you're giving them enough knowledge and then the translation of what that means so that they can understand in the context as an executive how to prioritize against mission objectives for their business, right? Like our business needs to perform these things to take care of our services and our customers. And so these are the security solutions that will help ensure the availability, integrity, confidentiality, and so on of those functions to be successful, to avoid downtime and of course data breaches, etc. What are some news sites and resources that help you stay in the know yourself?
This is going to say, I may be the only person that has ever a guest on your podcast that gives you this answer. But the three resources that I read most often are Directors and Boards magazine, Harvard Business Review, and Financial Times.
Financial
And
Times is
all of
excellent.
those are business resources. But even in business resources, they talk about the impact of cybersecurity.
Mhm.
And so what you want to do, regardless of your level within the organization, whether you're an entry-level person or the top of the professional pyramid, is understand the perspective of your stakeholders. The primary stakeholder of most cybersecurity output is a non-technical business person. And so I don't really pay a lot of attention to new products. I respect the people that present the RSA conference, but if my primary stakeholder is a non-technical business person, everything that they talk about in new products and new solutions in the marketplace is not as relevant as hearing what board directors are saying that board directors should care about for cybersecurity. Or with the Financial Times, hearing what financial executives say that financial executives need to care about from a security perspective. And so all of my reading primarily is business reading to understand the perspective of business stakeholders so that when I present something to them, it's in the context of the same things that they're reading. Because if I go to the RSA conference, which again is a great conference, please don't assume that I'm disparaging them, but there are no board directors at the RSA conference unless it's the director of a board for a company that has a product that's on the show floor.
Yep.
Or there are no chief financial officers at the RSA
Yeah,
conference,
definitely.
absent of the vendors that are at the conference. And
Yep.
so if you're thinking about real executives in real companies, you have an obligation to go and read the same things that they're reading. I disagree with the political perspective of the New York Times and the Washington Post, and so I
Yeah.
don't read those. But at the end of the day, wherever business people are getting their news is the place that security people need to get their news, because business people are going to make decisions based on security information.
Yep.
And one of the things that I found in my work, well, there's two things that I think are important for this conversation. One, cybersecurity is cybersecurity, regardless of the person. Encryption has an impact on the CFO and the CEO and the chief operating officer as much as it has an impact on the entry-level security analyst. The challenge for the security person is to say, for my position, given my role, and the consequences of using encryption properly or improperly, how do I communicate the importance of encryption to these C-suite people or to these business people? Because there's a cost for doing encryption. And there's a cost for identity and access management, and there's a cost for incident response, and there's a cost for business continuity. The role as you're communicating to your stakeholder is to have them understand why what you're doing is important. And the best way to do that is to read the same content that the business people are reading. And for the
Excellent.
most part, it's Financial Times, it's Harvard Business Review. And because I hang out with board members and because I'm a part of a board association, I also have subscriptions to board journals. And so I read those things as well. If we take it one step further, if you're already working in the industry, now you have to read all the professional publications for your industry. Like when I worked at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for 12 years, I almost went and got a master's degree in public health because 90% of the people that I talked to had a master's degree in public health.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I need to understand what you care about so that I can communicate what I'm doing in terms that you understand, so that we're making decisions for the organization that matter. As a consultant, I've been running Class LLC for 8 years before I retired from consulting and shifted my focus to parties and education. But every industry that I provided consulting services for, I knew as much about the industry as the people working in the industry. And so I can have a detailed conversation with bankers because I've done banking cybersecurity, or I could have a detailed conversation with manufacturers or oil and gas or hospitals. Every industry that I serve, I had an obligation to understand, what do they do? How do they do it? What do the business people care about? And how is this security thing that I'm doing having an impact on their mission and what they've promised to their customers? They don't teach this in degree programs or in certification programs, but the most valuable people are the people who know everything and then communicate in a factual and humble way so that everybody else is motivated to do what needs to be done for the benefit of the organization and their stakeholders.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely put those two, the Harvard review as well as Financial Times links in the description below. I'll just throw in a couple of my own. Slashdot.org is it's a little bit more on the technical side, but they do put a lot of news out there, things on emerging tech and other scientific research that impacts IT. Another one is Wired.com. They do some great pieces and write-ups on different data breaches and so forth. And then the third one I'm just going to say is Reddit. There are so many subreddits, whether if you're just studying for a CompTIA exam, r/CompTIA, r/cybercerts. I mean, there's so many subreddits. There's dedicated subreddits for almost every certification that's worth anything in industry. There is a subreddit for it that you can connect with people in that community to understand the cert, that they'll share their own resources and links to YouTube videos or other websites and share information. And that's what I said, that collaboration, information sharing is what makes our industry really beautiful. What I like
Can
to
I
do
add one more before we move
oh,
forward?
yeah.
All right, so this is a shameless plug, I'll be honest, but I'm on the board of directors for the Crisis Response Journal, and I write an article in the journal that's published quarterly. But the Crisis Response Journal is an international publication. They look broadly across all industries. They're really focused on crisis management, and I have the privilege of writing a cybersecurity article every month or every quarter. But the authors of those journal articles, because we have 90 days to write and research an article, those are outstanding articles that have great practice, and a lot is available on the website without a subscription. But shout out for an organization that I serve. The Crisis Response Journal would also be a good resource.
Wonderful. And then as soon as you give me the link, it will be in this description below. So guys, just all you got to do is click to expand and the link's going to be there for that. So already, Keon, you provided a lot of resources, links, where to get news, where to find, what to start with certifications. What I like to do is take a pause in the technical discussions of cyber and education. I like this part of where I call it my speed round of questions. It's just to kind of inject some levity, kind of shift gears a little bit. So what I'm going to do, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask a lot of what I call speed round questions, where there's no right or wrong answer. Just answer as fast as possible, whatever comes to mind first. Okay.
Got it.
All right. So first question, cake or pie?
Cake.
All right. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Trek.
Star Trek. All right. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
It depends on whether or not you're in Chicago, New York, or somewhere else.
Great. Actually, that's probably the best answer I've had so far. What is your favorite book that you've read? Whether as a child, adult, in your life, what is one book you say is your favorite?
Everybody listening to this podcast should go get the Essentials of Risk Management, 3rd edition. Best book I've ever read professionally, but it also has had an impact on all of my personal risk management decisions.
Wonderful. Okay. What is a favorite film all time?
Long Kiss Goodnight.
Samuel Jackson, Gina Davis, right?
Outstanding.
Yeah, so I'm a movie fan, and I have a website called MovieWrongs.com where I review movies. I'm also an author, so I review movies from the perspective of the script and the story and plot. And Long Kiss Goodnight was phenomenal. It's not reviewed on my site because I didn't start reviewing until about 2019, but phenomenal movie. So again, great performances by Samuel Jackson, Gina Davis. Um, could you maybe now shifting back into talking tech and cyber? Are there any kind of personal projects that you're working on that are not, not associated with Class LLC, or whether it's like a nonprofit work, volunteer work, or things that you're doing, or maybe a business that you want to highlight and talk about the great work they're doing that you would want to share with us?
Yeah, if you go to saprea.org, SAPREA.org, that organization focuses on helping people heal from the impact of child sexual abuse. Um, every penny that they get creates an opportunity for them to provide healing retreats at no cost to the victims. I have been featuring Saprea at my conference every year for the last 4 years. Last year in 2023 at my conference, we had a specific session that talked about the impact that cybersecurity can have on child sexual abuse by configuring the environment to prevent the distribution of child sexual abuse materials. So the executive director of Saprea and I, for the last 12 or 18 months, have gone around the country at different conferences. We've done it at my conference. We've done it at the ISACA Geek Week conference in Atlanta. We did it. He spoke. I didn't travel for that one. At the sexual exploitation conference in Washington D.C. at the beginning of this month in August of 2024. And in all cases, the idea is that we want people to donate to the cause because a lot of people need healing. The statistics are heartbreaking. But the other part of the equation is that most companies don't think about the impact of the distribution of child sexual abuse materials. Most companies don't say anything about it. So if you don't explicitly prohibit it, legally, the company doesn't have a leg to stand on. The other issue is that one, the distribution of child sexual abuse materials is a federal crime. And two, given my knowledge of human psychology and organizational behavior, if I am doing that and I'm married and I have a family, I am more likely to do it on my work computer because my family and my spouse can't log into my work computer. My work environment also probably has more resources than my home environment when we talk about computing power and networking speed and storage space. And most security tools are not intentionally configured to look for that contraband material. And so we're on a mission to get people to pay attention to the problem because security and IT people are well equipped to contribute to the solution. And the first step to the solution is awareness.
Yes.
And so if we talk about a passion project, I feel that my energy has changed. I'm sure it's observable
No, no,
in the video.
and this is something that I'm tell you right now, Keon. I see your spirit now really coming out about something that you really care about. So trust me, it's conveying itself on the video. If anyone watching this doesn't believe, I love this work that you're doing. So continue. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, and I'll make sure you have a link to the organization because all foundations depend on the generosity of others. But all of the generosity that's poured out on Saprea becomes free resources for people globally. Like they even do virtual healing retreats for women who have escaped sexual exploitation in South America, which gives them the freedom to not have all the shame that was associated with something they didn't even choose to participate in. And so they're doing all kinds of things all over the world. But the working group that we're doing really create something that I think is going to be valuable for the IT and the security industry, where other people who have similar passion can plug into a process that's going to help take care of others and make the world a better place and literally transform society, just like things like smoking cessation and seatbelts. All of this falls under the category of societal change. And I've hitched my cart to the preventing child sexual abuse horse, and we'll see how far we get with it.
Well, I commend you on the work that you're doing and going to spread this awareness. I mean, that's just phenomenal. That speaks In fact, if anything on this podcast spoke volumes of your character, that right there by itself speaks everything. That's all you need to know about Keon Williams, is that he is passionate. He's found a cause that is a tremendously needed cause globally. We just previous to that had mentioned about films, and while you was talking, it reminded me of a review I did for Barbie. And granted, the Barbie was a major billion-dollar film, and the world just went gaga over the director and Margot Robbie and all of these things about it. But to me, I felt it missed a huge opportunity as a billion-dollar film globally. That there was a scene towards the end of the film where she's going into her first gynecologist appointment, but she's in the waiting room where she walks by a wall that could have been, CGI'd for whatever region the film was, being shown in, whether it was in Africa, Europe, Asia, wherever. They could have put a poster up or the name of an organization that people, the women in the audience watching this, whether they're victims of, sexual violence, rape, children, and so forth, organizations that can help women, such as the organization you just mentioned, they could have had every region be able to be featured. And as a film company and studio, they missed that opportunity to truly make an impact in the world. And in my review, I called that out, saying that this film had an opportunity, whereas, of course, at the time, I didn't know it was going to make $1 billion globally, but I felt that the missed opportunity was in that last scene. She was going for a job interview for that nonprofit organization, whether it was in Europe, Africa, Asia, wherever region of the world that the film was screening in. They could have easily done that for each region and instantly shared a nonprofit that maybe women in those regions had no idea that resources there for them. And it could have been something that would have been impactful to the world, like taking something from just a Hollywood film of a Mattel toy. And I know that they were, going for, women empowerment and so forth. And then I think they still slightly missed that message. And I won't go down that rabbit hole, but they didn't fully nail that message home. But then at the end of the film, I'm like, man, I would have loved to have seen, this nonprofit for the United States, and then in Europe had whatever the number one resource for women in these different regions, because that was an opportunity to advertise and lift those nonprofits up with some awareness. But you doing the conferences and spreading this awareness and even showcasing them in your annual event. Wow, what a class act, Keon. I gotta tell you, what a class act. Before we kind of get towards the end of our discussion, I do want to kind of give you one big question. If we have a senior leader watching this right now, and I know you educate and you have a lot of seminars and sessions and training events for your senior leaders, plus you have your annual event. If you had to depart 1 to 3 significant priorities or tips or guidance, like just, it could just be one, or you go as many as 3, but just a handful of things that, hey, speaking to Mr. Cybersecurity leader or Mr. C-suite or executive, these are things that you got to put on your priority list, your agenda. And if you need more, of course, they know they can reach out to you through socials, which we'll get to in a minute. But what are those 1 to 2, 3 things that every executive you got to put on your radar today?
Thing number one, you must know how the company makes money every minute, every hour, every day, every week, every month of the year. I coached one of my friends before he took on the role of CISO at one of the largest clothing brands in the world. And I said, in the first 90 days, if you don't know how the company makes money, you have no credibility when you talk about security initiatives, because you have to tie security initiatives to the business impact. And so that would be thing number one. Thing number two, if you work in a company that has limited resources, to the extent that you don't have a big team, you don't have the budget to buy a lot of technology. One of the guys in my class this week said he was considering taking on the CISO role in a new company. He'll be the first CISO and it's a greenfield experience. I said, friend, your priority in the first year should be to meet the minimum requirements of cyber insurance. Because his plan, as we were brainstorming it, was to do all kinds of things that are important, but none of those things mattered in the short term.
Year one.
He had the risk of exhausting his entire budget on things that the rest of the business didn't understand. And I use cyber insurance as the driver because it's almost impossible to do business in 2024, regardless of your industry, without having cyber liability insurance. And I could pick the CIS critical security controls, or I could pick OWASP top 10, but in a business context, meeting the minimum requirements for us to have the best cyber insurance policy at the lowest rate possible is the most valuable thing that the CISO can do, regardless of the size of the company. And then the third thing that I would highlight is relationships. A lot of CISOs think that they need to report to the board or report directly to the CEO, and that's a 2-hour podcast by itself. But the person in a company that produces the most significant outcome is the chief operating officer. The chief operating officer's job is to glue all the people together so that the business can maximize its efficiency at scale and produce outcomes that are beneficial for the company and its stakeholders. So if the number one role in the company producing meaningful outcomes is the chief operating officer, I know for a fact, based on the ridiculous number of CISOs that I know, that very few of them have a close relationship with the chief operating officer while they're begging for attention from the board and from the CEO and from the CIO, and none of those people really care as much as a competent, experienced operations executive is going to care and recognize the value of the outcome that is produced, because security supports operational resilience. If I don't have an incident, that means my systems aren't down. If I don't have a breach of personal information, it means that I'm not losing billions of dollars in loss in opportunity costs because everybody is focusing on the incident rather than advancing the business and doing research and development and expanding our place in the marketplace. Instead, we're acting like Change Healthcare. And the only thing that you know about Change Healthcare is that they had the biggest cyber incident for healthcare in the history of the world in February. And they are probably going to lose $5 billion if you understand how to account for the impact. But all of that is preventable if you're working with the right people and have the right relationship and have the right attention. And I think that relationships with the right people matter as much as having the right program, focused on the right things, producing the right outcomes. And then
Wonderful.
if I could add a fourth thing,
Yeah, of course.
reach out to me and take my class, because we spend a lot of time talking about this. But again, my classes are only for senior executives. If
Yeah.
you're an entry-level person and you heard what I had to say on the podcast, just say that you heard me on Jim's podcast. When you invite me on LinkedIn, I'll accept automatically. If they're senior people and you think my class is a good fit, happy to chat about it, no strings attached. But these kinds of conversations are exciting and interesting because now we're getting away from vendors and tools telling us how to add value. And we're really collecting the knowledge share of lots of people in lots of places and identifying what are real solutions that are going to add value for the companies that we serve.
Well, there was a lot of just providing diamonds of knowledge and tips for any senior leader. These are diamonds. It's invaluable information and advice. You know, I would even augment on his second point about insurance. You know, we've always had it in our bodies of knowledge of different certifications that deal with continuity planning, disaster recovery planning, and it always says an element about third-party insurance, data breach insurance, incident insurance, and so on and so forth. And you know, it's funny because some companies do this. Obviously, they have made that decision to get some liability coverage, but a lot of companies go on, and even security teams and senior cybersecurity leaders will go on to think that we can run an effective security program. And what I advise to anyone with the mindset that we're not going to be breached, everyone has always a probability to be breached. With some security programs, your probability and your risk attack surface is wider and higher with probability than others. And this shifts day to day. It's not like today you might be, let's say, 99% patched and secured and hardened today, but tomorrow it could be a different story. You can wake up to a different world, just like the CrowdStrike thing, which really was just a poor patch management process on CrowdStrike's part. We won't deep dive into that. That's already been out there in the news enough. But the whole idea of just getting that insurance, getting some coverage, maybe you make the decisions as executives that, hey, our business being down for a week would cost us, you know, $10 million. And so we're going to insure up to these assets that are valued at 10 million, et cetera. You do your evaluations. You might decide, you know what, we really don't have the budget or can afford that particular plan. We'll just cover 20% of our assets or whatever you deem as the minimum to continue operations. But that's a great point. Not enough people are talking about cybersecurity insurance because you are going to have security gaps in all your programs. I know 5 defense in-depth frameworks, and I know 4, I'm an expert in 4 security frameworks, and all of them have gaps. They all have gaps. One of the biggest gaps is because most of these programs focus on the CIA triad. And I do have a paper, anyone could Google Beyond the CIA Triad, Jim West. I put out a paper years ago talking about, Don Parker talked about the 9 security core principles, and there's very few cyber professionals that even heard about those other 6, but we hear about them. We hear about, authentication, multi-factor authentication. Banking apps embrace that as appropriately as they should. And then, of course, you had authorized use. We see privacy controls. So people have heard about some of them, but yet the number one control of that 9 for the past 15 plus years of data breaches that has been the reason why that these programs fail companies is possession. And back when Ed Snowden did his little drop of information, that proved that he was able to leave the facility with information both digitally and in print. They lost positive control of their data, where their data goes, who can access the data, et cetera, et cetera. But the point being is the only solution that industry could come up with was data loss prevention, DLP. And DLP has its severe shortcomings as well. So a lot of companies think, oh, we now have a DLP system on our endpoint security program. We're good. You're not. There are still gaps in every security plan, and every security framework inherently has gaps because their focuses are different. They focus, some are more information centric, some are more, protected enclaves with network segmentation and using, layers of encryption to segment data flow. There's all kinds of approaches to doing security, and there's not one that's better than the other because it's really based on the context of your operations and what your business does. But what I would add to the wonderful tips that Keon's provided is look up Beyond the CIA Triad, and as a senior leader or as a person that wants to learn more about security as a cybersecurity professional, entry level to advanced, at least read about the other 6 security principles, at least have that perspective of these are where your gaps are in your security plan. So when you're doing things like your first 90 days on the job, you're looking at your security plan, look at it through the lens of there's another 6 controls that these frameworks aren't always accounting for. And it's not to say that, hey, if you 100% implement risk NIST RMF, 100%, there's still gaps in the program because there's going to be what I call risk negotiation. There's going to be certain controls you can't do up to 100%, whether it's through it may impact operation or the cost, whatever the reason are. And of course, there's another term called plan of actions and milestones that a lot of businesses have to live with. The wish list. If we had the budget, we would have all these great systems. But what I advise to people is that insurance tip alone that Keon has mentioned is number one. I would actually make that number one in your security planning and budget, simply because you will be breached at some point. You will have an potential insider attack. You will have just stupid users clicking the link, and now all of a sudden you have a ransomware attack that moved laterally throughout your organization. You may never have that rock star team in your SOC. You may never have everybody that's level 99 and performing at that 100% every day. Some people just barely can do 50, 60 in some days. So to err as human, there are going to be, Art of War by Sun Tzu. He has a concept. If you try to protect on all sides, you're weak on all sides. And this applies even to security programs today. When people say, well, okay, well, some organizations get hacked, everybody's been hacked. It's whether or not they know it or they've disclosed it. And so NSA field office has been hacked. FBI has been hacked. Universities have been hacked. Banks have been hacked. If these Fortune 500 companies, which have million-dollar budgets, potentially million-dollar budgets, and security operation teams, security executives, security staff, they have all these roles, what does a small to medium business stand a chance when these Fortune 500s are being breached and hacked? So again, if you're a senior leader, executive, stakeholder watching at this point, Keon gave you the diamond of go and just price some cybersecurity insurance and put that plan and appropriate program budget for your next fiscal year to have some kind of coverage, whether it's a 10, 20% of your assets, if it's asset focused, or review your service contracts and ensure what are your fail-safe, conditions in your service contracts. Because a lot of folks, they hand stuff off to the cloud. And I tell you, every day they're finding new vulnerabilities in AWS, Azure. It doesn't matter which cloud provider you're using. There are security researchers every day publishing papers. I just interviewed 2 guys that just presented at DEF CON, talked about public AMIs, and they just took what I would consider in one particular region, which is probably one of the top 2 most utilized regions for cloud, AWS. They basically took what I would consider as a cup of water out the ocean of all the data that they had access to. They took a cup of water and they analyzed that. 120 plus accounts that were public that they got access to that shouldn't have that had sensitive information. And of the 120, they had about 20 accounts they had root access. Root access, and that was just that one cup out the ocean. Just imagine if they had the money and processing time to look at the whole ocean. But just that should just be a warning. So again, Keon, I appreciate you taking the time today to just share some of your knowledge. Again, folks, go back and replay his 3 tips there, and then check out Class LLC. Search for this guy on LinkedIn. In fact, I will make sure his LinkedIn profile is in the description below. There's going to be a long list of URLs in the description below, but bookmark all those URLs because they're valuable to you. They're resources to get. And again, it's folks like Keon here that is passionate, he's driven, he's motivated, and he's starting at the top, because that's who's steering the ship in our organizations and businesses. So I applaud you for focusing on our senior leaders, because they do need the perspective, the education, and the help. So keep doing the great work you're doing, Keon. Last but not least, is there any other socials you'd like to shout out and promote? Because I'm definitely putting your LinkedIn in the description.
No socials, but I used to be the president for the International Board of Directors for the Information System Security Association. I highly encourage all security people should check out ISSA.org. ISSA is vendor neutral. They're focused on professional development and just professionalism for people that do security. Jimmy has been appointed the new president for the association, so they're going to be in good hands. And I think it's a great opportunity for entry-level, intermediate, and executive professionals to start working in a community and having access to people that are going to contribute to their advancement.
Excellent. Well, again, even in the last few minutes here, Keon is giving you diamonds. And so, again, Keon, thank you so much. Again, I know your time is extremely valuable, but this has been a great discussion. I would love to have you back on the podcast at sometime in the future. And again, keep doing the great work you're doing with that nonprofit. That is just phenomenal. And again, speaks tremendous amount. It speaks to your character and who you are. And thank you for doing that selfless service and being in service of not just, the United States, but the world. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was fun being here.
Awesome.